They fed armies, cured disease, and survived when everything else spoiled. The foods that saved entire civilizations never disappeared. Without freezers, factories, or modern medicine, our ancestors preserved nutrition through brilliance born of necessity. They turned dried meat into fuel for Arctic expeditions, fermented vegetables into immune powerhouses, and aged cheese in caves where bacteria did what modern labs still can't replicate. And then we forgot. We traded centuries of resilience for convenience and built food systems that collapse at the first sign of crisis. But the real innovations, the ones that fed empires and resisted spoilage for decades, are still with us, waiting to be rediscovered. This is Stellar Eureka, and today we're retracing the story of 10 forgotten foods that outsmarted famine, disease, and time. We start our journey where survival meant extremes, Arctic winds, empty landscapes, and no second chances. One food could last 50 years, survive blizzards, fuel armies, and keep you alive with just a single bite. But it wasn't created in a lab. It came from the Great Plains, perfected by native tribes long before modern nutrition even existed. This was pemmican, a dense brick of dried meat and fat that explorers, traders, and even polar expeditions relied on to cheat death. How powerful was it? A single pound carried more energy than 17 energy bars. No refrigeration, no packaging, just pure survival engineered by hand. Pemmican got its name from the Cree word Pemmican, meaning manufactured grease. But that barely scratches the surface. This was food as infrastructure, calorically dense, immune to rot, and nutritionally complete. It could feed you through an entire Arctic winter. And the formula? Unbelievably precise. 50 pounds of dried meat to 40 pounds of rendered fat. One bison cow provided almost that exact ratio, fat and protein in perfect balance, as if the animal had been designed for this food. The process was brilliant. Meat was sliced thin and dried over fire until brittle, then crushed to powder using stone mortars. The fat was melted down slowly, no shortcuts, then combined with the meat and wild berries like chokecherries or saskatoons. The result? A waterproof, bacteria-proof, life-proof survival cake that tasted, well, functional. But it worked, and unlike modern survival food, it didn't need packaging, preservatives, or electricity, just fire, knowledge, and time. Pemmican wasn't just survival food, it shaped exploration, trade, and even politics. When Roald Amundsen raced to the South Pole in 1911, his team relied on pemmican to endure 10,000-calorie days of brutal sledging. Shackleton's stranded crew survived 2 Arctic winters with only a few supplies, one of them pemmican meant for the dogs. No refrigeration, no preservatives, just ancient indigenous food science, though, to be fair, the South Pole was doing most of the chilling. In the 1800s, pemmican scaled up from tradition to industry. The Métis of the Canadian prairies processed entire buffalo hunts into compact fuel bricks. These cakes could be stored, transported, and traded across thousands of kilometers, feeding fur traders, soldiers, and explorers from Hudson Bay to the Rockies. That trade became so valuable it sparked armed conflict. In 1816, the Hudson's Bay Company blocked pemmican exports from the Red River Colony to cut off their rivals at the Northwest Company. The result was the Pemmican War, a battle not just over food, but over who controlled mobility and profit across the Canadian interior. For Indigenous nations, pemmican was more than commerce, it was culture. Communities gathered to produce it, with women leading the process and decisions. Drying times, fat rendering, berry selection, each detail was passed down with precision. The result wasn't a guess, it was biochemical engineering with sacred roots. Modern attempts to replicate it usually miss the mark. The fat must be rendered at low heat, meat ground to powder, and every element mixed at exact temperatures. Even the wrong berry can ruin the shelf life. And yet, with nothing but fire, stone, and knowledge, They made a food that still beats most of what we carry today. Pemmican defied time with fat and meat. Our next one did it with sugar and bees. Some foods expire in days, others in months, but one has outlived entire civilizations. It's been found buried in tombs, sealed in clay, forgotten for thousands of years, and still perfectly edible. Honey doesn't rot, it doesn't mold, it doesn't even age. In 2003, pipeline workers in Georgia unearthed a noblewoman's tomb from over 5,500 years ago. Inside were ceramic jars containing the world's oldest honey, still golden, still sweet, and still safe to eat. That honey predates the pyramids. It's older than the wheel, yet it had never gone bad. So how is that even possible? Honey is the biochemical fortress. Its moisture content is incredibly low, too dry for bacteria to grow. Most microbes need water to survive, and in honey, they simply shrivel and die. But dryness isn't the only defense. Honey is also surprisingly acidic, about as sharp as orange juice. That alone can stop most bacteria in their tracks, but bees take it a step further. When they make honey, they add an enzyme that slowly releases hydrogen peroxide, the same antiseptic you'd find in a first aid kit. It's like built-in sterilization, so honey doesn't just sit there, it actively sterilizes itself. And then comes the strangest power. Honey pulls moisture out of the air. It's hygroscopic, which means anything even slightly damp nearby, honey will start drying it out. It creates a sort of invisible preservation zone, like a force field, that keeps rot away. To ancient civilizations, it wasn't biochemistry, it was magic. Egyptian tomb paintings show floating beehives drifting down the Nile, following flowers in bloom. They called honey the tears of Ra, and they weren't wrong to worship it. Honey isn't just a sweetener, it's the closest thing we've ever found to edible immortality. Preserving food without fire, salt, or smoke sounds impossible, but for thousands of years, honey made it look easy. Ancient Egyptians used it to preserve duck. Greek soldiers carried honey-soaked fish on long campaigns. Celtic druids sealed organ meats in honey, creating nutrient-packed rations that could last for years without spoiling. It wasn't just about keeping food edible, it was about keeping food nutritional. Honey didn't just protect, it enhanced. When fruits, vegetables, or meats were submerged in pure honey, the sugars slowly replaced water in the cells, halting spoilage while maintaining flavor and texture. Unlike salting or smoking, which radically altered the food, honey preservation kept things lasting nearly fresh, just sweeter and deeper, like nature's version of slow aging. And it worked on more than food. Ancient physicians learned that herbs and roots stored in honey retained their potency far longer. Honey not only prevented decay, it also helped the body absorb those compounds better. This made honey-based medicines more bioavailable, often more effective than some modern versions. In medieval Europe, monasteries kept beehives not just for wax, but to preserve herbal medicines. Honey was a critical part of their medical system. Across cultures, honey-preserved food became strategic. Pharaohs stored it for families. Warriors carried it into battles. Merchants traded it across continents. Honey became both ration and currency, sweet, durable, and nearly immortal. And the flavors it produced were legendary. Over time, meats developed deep, almost wine-like complexity as their amino acids reacted with the sugars in honey. Fruits kept their original taste but gained a richer, honeyed sweetness that intensified with age. Even vegetables transformed, taking on savory sweet profiles that became prized ingredients in sophisticated dishes, sometimes reserved for royal banquets. The truth is, our ancestors achieved preservation results that modern technology still can't match. Their honey-preserved foods lasted longer than anything we've created, retained more nutrients than freeze-dried alternatives, and required no artificial additives or complex infrastructure. While we rely on refrigeration systems and chemical preservatives, they used bees, jars, and time to build something more effective, more sustainable, and more nutritious than anything we've developed since. Yes, honey alters the flavor, but it's a forgotten preservation method worth rediscovering. Honey showed us how nature can preserve through sweetness, but in the Arctic, nature preserved through force. No sugar, just cod, wind, and survival. On the icy coast of northern Norway, where the winds howl and the sun disappears for weeks, Vikings discovered a food that changed everything. They realized cod didn't need salting or smoking to survive the winter. It just needed air and time. The result was stockfish, dried cod so hard it rang like wood, yet packed with enough nutrition to fuel ocean crossings. Hung from towering wooden racks in the Arctic air, the fish slowly lost all moisture. The cold preserved it, the wind purified it, and what remained could last for years without spoiling. This wasn't a kitchen trick, it was survival engineering. Between February and May, Norway's climate became the perfect preservation tool. Cold, but not freezing, windy but stable, with sea air that acted like a natural sterilizer. No modern system has ever replicated it. And what emerged was one of the most concentrated foods on Earth. Stockfish contains over 78% protein, more than any other natural food. Just over 2 pounds of stockfish delivers the nutrition of more than 11 pounds of fresh fish, with intensified levels of vitamin D, calcium, B12, and omega-3s. Drying didn't reduce its value, it concentrated it. That's why Viking longships didn't just carry warriors, they carried stockfish. With it, crews could travel for months across the open sea, no spoilage, no resupply, no wasted cargo space. It fed voyages to Iceland, Greenland, and even Vinland, the Viking name for North America. At Lance aux Meadows, a site in Newfoundland, Canada, archaeologists found cod remains matching Norwegian stockfish. It was proof that this ancient food helped launch one of history's boldest expansions. The fish lasted the journey, and thanks to it, so did the crew. Long after the Viking Age ended, stockfish kept shaping Europe. By the 1100s, it had become one of the most traded foods on the continent. Cities like Bergen, Norway, were built almost entirely on stockfish exports. German merchants from the Hanseatic League turned it into a continental commodity, shipping planks of dried cod to England, France, Italy, and beyond. It was cheap, dense, and nearly indestructible. One cargo ship of stockfish could feed thousands. This wasn't just commerce, it was mass protein distribution in the medieval world. In Iceland, stockfish wasn't just food, it was survival. Harsh winters and limited agriculture made fresh protein scarce, but imported Norwegian stockfish became the island's backbone. It was eaten daily, like bread. Families relied on it to get through seasons when nothing else was available. And then religion made it even bigger. Catholic Europe had over 150 fasting days each year, times when meat was forbidden. But fish was allowed. Stockfish became the perfect solution, preserved, portable, and ready to cook whenever needed. Monasteries and noble households stocked it year-round. It became so essential that trade routes adjusted to meet demand during Lent alone. Even the Mediterranean took notice. In 1432, an Italian nobleman named Pietro Querini was shipwrecked in the Lofoten Islands, a rugged archipelago in Arctic Norway known for its stockfish production. He survived, returned to Venice, and wrote about the stockfish production he had witnessed. Southern Europe was stunned. Preserving fish without salt, a costly commodity in the region, seemed impossible. Querini's report launched centuries of trade, and his name is still remembered in Norwegian stockfish history. To eat stockfish, you needed skill. The planks were rock hard and had to be soaked for days before cooking. But once rehydrated, the result was tender, nutrient-rich, and deeply flavorful. Some regional dishes that emerged from these techniques, like Italian baccalà alla vicentina, are still culinary staples today. What made stockfish so revolutionary wasn't just how long it lasted, it was how effortlessly it scaled. No artificial energy, no chemicals, no waste, just wind, cod, and thyme. But not every long-lasting food was rich or flavorful. If stockfish was nutrition by nature, this next one was survival by design. Brutal, bland, and nearly indestructible. In 1805, on the deck of HMS Victory during the Battle of Trafalgar, British sailors reached for something that looked less like food and more like construction material. It was hardtack, a biscuit so solid it could chip teeth, stop musket balls, and survive decades at sea without spoiling.
One of the most bizarre pieces in our collection is this item right here. It's a piece of genuine Civil War era hardtack.
Made from just flour, water, and salt, hardtack wasn't meant to taste good. It was built to last. And for generations of sailors and soldiers, it meant the difference between survival and starvation. Its secret was total dehydration. Baked at high heat, often twice, hardtack became too dry for bacteria or mold to survive. The 34 holes punched into each British biscuit weren't just for even drying. After 1757, Royal Navy bakers standardized them to honor the 34 ships present at the Battle of Cartagena. It was a functional design that doubled as patriotic symbolism. The result was food that bordered on immortal. During the American Civil War, soldiers ate hardtack baked during the Mexican-American War, over a decade old. Some Spanish-American War rations came from the 1860s. The oldest surviving hardtack, from 1851, still sits in Denmark's Kronborg Castle. Even older examples exist in London's Maritime Museum. But this legendary durability came with equally legendary problems. Sailors gave it names like worm castles for the ones crawling with maggots, sheet iron crackers for the ones that could dent forks, and tooth dullers for the ones that wore down molars through sheer friction. They adapted. Breaking hardtack into hot coffee softened it and floated out the bugs. Some men ate it in total darkness to avoid seeing what else was on the biscuit. The most desperate would soak hardtack in seawater, creating a soggy but edible gruel that at least provided calories when fresh food was months away. Union soldiers even sang about it, writing parody songs that joked about using hardtack for tent pegs or ammunition. No one loved it, but no one went to war or to sea without it. Hardtack wasn't just a naval ration. It fed empires on land and sea. During America's westward expansion, frontier families packed hardtack for wagon journeys that could last months. Arctic explorers relied on it where shelf life meant survival. Even remote lighthouse keepers stocked it as backup in places where resupply could take years. Different nations refined it to fit their needs. German troops had Kommissbrot, a dense rye bread adapted to cold climates. Russian forces used Sukhari, a twice-baked biscuit that could survive brutal winters. Each version followed the same principle: simplicity, durability, and zero dependence on refrigeration. Making hardtack properly wasn't easy. The right flour, minimal water, precise baking, and timed drying were essential. Too moist and it spoiled. Too dry and it crumbled. Military bakeries became production centers where preservation became science. And incredibly, the tradition still lingers. The Polish Army issues Panzerwaffel. Parts of Canada and Papua New Guinea still rely on hardtack-style bread in remote operations. Survivalists study it as a blueprint for emergency food, lightweight, reliable, and practically eternal. But is it worth bringing back? Probably not. The taste is unforgiving and modern rations are vastly more palatable. Yet the brilliance behind it, making food last for decades without packaging, chemicals, or power, is still unmatched. And in a world rethinking food security, the brutal simplicity of hardtack might feel less like a relic and more like a food resource worth keeping in mind. But not all forgotten foods were survival tools. Some were flavor innovations lost to time. Everyone knows ketchup. You've probably had it with fries or burgers or hot dogs. Just hearing the word probably brings the taste of tomatoes and sugar to mind. But before tomato ketchup ruled the table, there was another version, darker, thinner, and far more complex. It wasn't made with tomatoes at all. It was mushroom ketchup, and for over a century, it was considered the height of culinary refinement in Britain. The story starts, surprisingly, in ancient China. There, cooks created a fermented fish sauce called ketchup, and yes, the name might sound familiar. It was rich in umami and used to deepen the flavor of simple dishes. British traders encountered it in the 1600s and brought the idea home. But instead of copying it directly, British cooks adapted it. They replaced fish with mushrooms, earthy, abundant, and naturally full of glutamates. The result was mushroom ketchup, a thin, savory sauce that worked more like soy sauce than the sugary condiment we know today. Its preparation was precise. Mushrooms were chopped, salted, and left overnight to release their juices. That liquid was combined with spices like bay leaf, mace, black pepper, and ginger, then slowly simmered into a rich, fermented base that could transform plain food into something deeply flavorful. This wasn't ketchup to pour over everything. It was a flavor enhancer, savory, wine-like, and subtle. Cooks used it to elevate sauces, meats, and vegetables, not drown them. The first known recipe appeared in 1727 in a British household manual called The Complete Housewife. It wasn't just a cookbook, it was one of the earliest bestsellers in English culinary publishing, covering everything from food to medicine to home remedies. Mushroom ketchup was considered essential knowledge for any skilled home cook. By the 1800s, nearly every British pantry had a bottle of mushroom ketchup aging in the back. It was a marker of good taste, and it inspired a whole family of condiments made from walnuts, oysters, and anchovies, each designed to unlock deeper flavor from humble ingredients. But over time, these savory elixirs faded, overshadowed by a sweeter, simpler version that could be mass-produced: tomato ketchup. Ironically, tomatoes themselves had long been feared in Europe because they belonged to the nightshade family. They were considered poisonous, even demonic, for generations. To make things worse, wealthy diners who ate tomatoes from pewter plates sometimes developed lead poisoning. The fruit's acidity leached lead from the metal, creating a deadly reputation that lingered for generations. That began to change in 1812 when American physician James Meese published a tomato ketchup recipe in an early recipe collection. His version was thin and tart, but it paved the way for something new. The real shift came in 1876 when Henry J. Heinz launched his ketchup. The name might ring a bell. Shelf-stable, sweetened with sugar, and bottled in glass so customers could see its purity, it was instantly appealing and very different from anything that came before. Mushroom ketchup had been earthy and complex. Tomato ketchup was sweet, simple, and satisfying. One required a developed palate, the other didn't, and that shift aligned perfectly with changing American tastes. Within a generation, mushroom ketchup faded almost entirely from kitchens. But something was lost along the way. Modern chefs who rediscover traditional mushroom ketchup describe it as eye-opening, layered, savory, and balanced. It enhances food rather than masking it. There's no syrupy sweetness, just a deep, umami-rich flavor that builds complexity in sauces, stews, and braises. Only one major commercial version remains: Geo Watkins mushroom ketchup, still produced in Kent using traditional methods. Michelin star chefs like Heston Blumenthal have used it to add unexpected depth to modern dishes, reintroducing flavors that vanished with the Victorian era. Recreating it at home can be tricky. Today's mushroom varieties aren't the same, and modern salts and spices behave differently. Even the fermentation environment has changed. The original flavor came from more than a recipe, it came from an entire ecosystem of local ingredients and seasonal methods. Still, mushroom ketchup reminds us that flavor doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Its depth came from restraint, not excess, and that's exactly what made it unforgettable, and perhaps worth trying at least once. Enhancing flavor is one thing. Preventing death at sea is another. And in the 1700s, one humble fermented vegetable did both. In 1768, Captain Cook sailed for the South Pacific to chart new lands and observe the transit of Venus. On board were barrels containing 7,860 pounds of fermented cabbage, sauerkraut. His sailors weren't thrilled, but Cook had done his homework. Scurvy had killed more seamen than shipwrecks, battles, or storms combined, and he was determined not to let history repeat itself. 3 years later, he returned with every man alive and not a single scurvy death, rewriting naval history with nothing more than salted, soured cabbage. What Cook intuitively understood is what science now confirms. Fermented vegetables preserve food, enhance nutrition, and support the human body in ways fresh produce often can't. While refrigeration was still centuries away, our ancestors discovered a preservation method that didn't just keep cabbage edible, it transformed into disease-fighting, gut-healing, immune-boosting food. Without realizing it, they were engineering one of the most sophisticated biotechnologies of their time. It all starts with a cabbage and some salt. No fire, no fancy tools, just patience and the right conditions. As the vegetables sit in their brine, naturally occurring bacteria begin to take over. They reshape the food at a microscopic level, pushing out oxygen, lowering the pH, and making the environment safe from spoilage. What seems like a simple pickling is actually a sophisticated microbial takeover that unlocks entirely new nutritional value. These microbes don't just preserve the food, they make it better. Sauerkraut ends up richer in vitamin C than raw cabbage, contains newly formed B vitamins, and introduces live bacteria that help digestion, boost immunity, and support long-term metabolic health. Long before anyone knew what a probiotic was, fermented vegetables were quietly saving lives on ships, farms, and battlefields. Across civilizations, fermentation evolved into a shared ritual. In Korea, the annual tradition of kimjang transformed cabbage preservation into a communal ritual. Families gathered to prepare hundreds of pounds in one day, enough to last the entire winter. Recipes were passed down not as written formulas, but as embodied knowledge shaped by climate, region, and memory. In Germany, barrels of sauerkraut became essential frontier supplies, continuing to ferment on wagons headed west. And during the construction of the Great Wall, Chinese workers survived brutal winters thanks to vats of preserved vegetables hauled up mountain paths when nothing else would grow. The tools they used were deceptively simple but brilliantly precise. Unglazed ceramic crocks, heavy wooden lids, and carved stones created oxygen-free environments that allowed beneficial bacteria to thrive while keeping spoilage out. Without even knowing what a microbe was, our ancestors engineered fermentation systems with nearly perfect biological control, no refrigeration, no metal, no electricity. But fermentation also carried symbolic weight. Many cultures saw it as a reflection of life itself, a slow, unseen transformation from decay to nourishment. To ferment was to believe that time and nature, left to work together, could create something better than what you started with. It was preservation, but also renewal. But not every preservation method relied on time and microbes. Some used crystals that could stop decay in its tracks. Salt is everywhere today, but for most of history, it was power. Its ability to preserve meat transformed food from something temporary into something transportable. Suddenly, fish from Newfoundland could appear on Spanish tables. Irish beef could fuel French armies. Civilizations no longer lived at the mercy of spoilage. And it started over 5,000 years ago when the Egyptians discovered that meat packed in salt didn't rot, it transformed. The salt pulled out moisture, starving bacteria, halting decay. Without even realizing it, they had launched the first biochemical revolution in food history. Salt preservation works through osmotic dehydration. In plain terms, salt draws water out of both food and microbes. Less water means less bacteria, and fewer bacteria means no spoilage. Meat cured this way became lighter, denser, and nearly immortal. The process removed up to 85% of water from the flesh. What remained was rich in protein, concentrated in nutrients, and capable of lasting for years. This wasn't just about storage, it was about mobility, trade, and dominance. Empires expanded, armies marched, and entire towns thrived because salt made it possible to store energy without decay. It wasn't just a seasoning, it was the infrastructure of survival. In medieval Europe, salt cod wasn't just food, it was obligation. Catholic law banned meat for over 150 days a year, but fish was allowed. Meat symbolized indulgence, fish was modest, fitting for fasting, and self-denial. Without cold storage, only salt-preserved fish could fill the gap. Stockpiles had to last year-round. Cities scheduled shipments around Lent, and if you couldn't get cod, you were in trouble. The result? An explosion in trade networks powered by salted fish. Bergen became Northern Europe's cod capital. The Hanseatic League built its fortune moving planks of dried cod from Norway to England, France, and the Mediterranean. Religious rules created an economy. Salted cod became a staple not just in monasteries and markets, but in kitchens from Lisbon to Krakow. In some regions, it fed more people than bread. Salt itself was so valuable that entire wars were fought over it. In the American Civil War, salt producers were considered vital to national survival. In China, salt taxes funded dynasties, and across Europe, salt roads stitched together trade empires. But producing edible salted meat or fish wasn't easy. The right cut, the right salt, the right conditions, too much or too little ruined the whole batch. Families treated the knowledge like gold, passing techniques through generations. Salt didn't just preserve food, it preserved cultures, enabled conquests, and laid the foundations for international trade. But while salt fueled empires and trade routes, a different kind of nourishment came quietly from the woods. Some of the most powerful superfoods on Earth don't grow on farms, they grow in the wild, unlabeled, unprotected, and mostly ignored. Before supermarkets and agriculture, our ancestors relied on a different kind of food system. It didn't require fences, irrigation, or plowing, just deep ecological knowledge and timing. Foraging wasn't a fallback, it was the original food security system, and in many cases, it delivered better nutrition than anything agriculture ever produced. Wild dandelions contain over 6 times more calcium than romaine lettuce. Lamb's quarters provide more calcium than milk. Just 3.5 ounces of cooked nettle provide all essential amino acids and nearly 40% of your daily calcium needs. These weren't survival foods, they were nutrient powerhouses, and we've covered some of them in detail in our episode 10 Common Weeds That Are Actually Expensive Superfoods. And they came in cycles. Spring brought nettle and chickweed, packed with vitamin C to fight off scurvy after long winters. Summer meant berries and herbs. Autumn delivered chestnuts and roots, dense in fats and starches for cold seasons. Nature wasn't random, it provided what was needed when it was needed. Even the health benefits matched the seasons. Spring greens helped flush winter toxins. Summer herbs cooled the body. Fall nuts stored calories for survival. This was nutritional intelligence developed without labs, just observation, practice, and survival. Foragers didn't just find food, they preserved it. Chestnuts were smoked for winter. Acorns were leached to remove bitterness and turned into flour. Berries were fermented or dried to store their nutrients. These weren't simple harvests, they were engineered solutions. And when systems broke down, wild food made the difference. During the Dutch hunger winter of 1944, thousands survived only because elders still remembered where and how to forage. In Ireland's Great Famine, communities that turned to wild greens like nettle, seaweed, and watercress endured far better than those who didn't. Wild food wasn't folklore, it was survival science. To the untrained eye, foraging looks like luck. But traditional foragers weren't guessing. They were applying encyclopedic knowledge built over generations that rivaled early medical science. They knew when dandelion roots were most potent, which berries needed drying, and how to prepare nettles without a single sting. They tracked plant cycles, moisture, sun exposure, and even understood how soil types affected medicinal potency. For them, wild food wasn't something you stumbled across, it was something you knew how to find. And they weren't just gathering nutrition, they were harvesting medicine. Willow bark for pain, elderberry for colds, plantain for wound care. What modern pharmacology now validates, foragers practiced intuitively. Their trails through the woods were as much apothecaries as they were grocery aisles. Today, most people couldn't name a single edible wild plant, let alone find one. We've traded millennia of food wisdom for grocery aisles and forgotten how to feed ourselves from the land. But what made their system powerful was sustainability. Foragers knew how to take just enough to keep ecosystems thriving. Cut above the root, leave a third of the patch, don't harvest from a plant that's about to seed. These weren't rules, they were survival contracts with nature. That knowledge is nearly gone, but the food isn't. It's still there, growing underfoot, waiting to be noticed again. Underground, another kind of preservation was taking shape, one that didn't need sunlight, only patience. Everyone knows cheese, but not like this. Before refrigeration, pasteurization, or factory blocks wrapped in plastic, cheese wasn't just a topping, it was survival. And in one unlikely place, it became something else entirely. Deep in southern France, natural limestone caves carved by ancient rivers weren't just cool storage. They became transformation chambers. Inside, raw sheep's milk turned into Roquefort, a sharp, veined cheese so valuable it was legally protected as early as 1411. But more than that, these caves preserved food for months, even years, in conditions so ideal that modern science still can't recreate them. According to legend, it all started when a shepherd left his lunch in a cave and forgot about it. Weeks later, he returned to find it had molded and tasted better. Behind the myth is a truth more fascinating, that environmental conditions inside caves, stable temperatures, high humidity, gentle airflow, and microbial-rich stone walls could ferment and preserve food in a way no surface method could match. It was one of history's most fortunate accidents, and over time, it became precision science. Each cave developed its own microbial fingerprint. Bacteria, fungi, and yeast clung to stone and wood. When cheese was aged there, these microbes didn't just prevent spoilage, they rewrote its chemistry. They broke down the proteins and fats in a slow, controlled process, unlocking deep, evolving flavors no industrial process can replicate. Just 1 gram of cheese rind from a cave-aged wheel can host 10 billion microbes. Some cheeses carry over 400 distinct microbial species. This isn't aging, it's biochemical storytelling. And what's most remarkable? These caves didn't need designing. Nature had already built them. What caves offered wasn't just preservation, it was identity. Cheese aged in Swiss alpine caves developed nutty sweetness in English caverns. Cheddar turned dense and savory. In southern France, Roquefort bloomed with veins of sharp, fungal tang. Same base ingredient, wildly different outcomes. Why? Because caves didn't just age cheese. They flavored it naturally, regionally, and irreproducibly. Aging shelves weren't stainless steel. They were raw wood, hand-fitted into stone. Every few days, wheels were turned by hand, inspected, tapped. Cheesecloth let moisture in and out, guiding the rind's bloom like a living skin. Over centuries, these spaces evolved into controlled chaos, humans working with microbial nature, not against it. Each wheel was a record of that dance between cave, time, and skill. Roquefort caves became so central to France's food identity that aging cheese there isn't just tradition, It's law, with protected designation laws that have been in place since 1411. No cave, no name. And while modern cheesemaking uses filtered air and sterilized rooms, the flavor often tastes muted by comparison. That's why small-scale artisans are returning to cave environments, real or recreated, to revive techniques that time almost buried. The result isn't just better cheese, it's a reconnection with the food tradition that was never broken, just forgotten. Cheese aging was science before science had a name, but it wasn't the only example of ancestral precision hiding in plain sight. In medieval Europe, soup wasn't comfort food, it was survival. While nobles dined on roasts and sugar sculptures, peasants relied on broth made from onions, potatoes, and whatever else could be salvaged. Yet here's the twist. Those rustic soups often delivered better nutrition than anything served in the great halls. What seemed like desperation was, in truth, one of humanity's most elegant responses to malnutrition. Using only local vegetables, scraps, and time-tested technique, common families created meals that could sustain health, fuel labor, and resist spoilage across entire seasons. And modern science is still unpacking how. The combination of onions and potatoes, found across Europe, created powerful nutritional synergy. Onions offered sulfur compounds and quercetin antioxidants that boosted immune response and reduced inflammation. Potatoes delivered slow-release starch for energy, potassium for muscle function, and vitamin C that helped prevent scurvy in the absence of fresh fruit. Add a splash of dairy or legumes, and suddenly the soup contained a complete protein profile equivalent to meat without the cost. What's striking is that this wasn't unique to one region. Across the continent, different cultures arrived at the same answer. Italian peasants created acquacada, literally cooked water, blending stale bread, onions, olive oil, and foraged vegetables. In France, pot au feu transformed bones, oxtail, and root vegetables into rich, slow-simmered broths. German winters were softened by sauerkraut-based soups consumed multiple times daily when nothing else was available. These soups weren't improvised, they were engineered. Peasant cooks knew which ingredients to add first, how long to simmer tough roots to release their minerals, and which herbs to use to improve not just flavor, but nutrient absorption. Salt wasn't just seasoning, it was precious. Where available, it enhanced flavor, aided preservation, and added essential minerals. But in many regions, it was used sparingly, which is why herbs, fermentation, and long boiling times became essential tools for extracting and preserving nutrients. And this wasn't just medieval wisdom. During the 872-day siege of Leningrad in World War II, soup once again became the cornerstone of survival. When storehouses ran empty and supply lines were cut, people relied on cabbage leaves, potato peels, and whatever scraps they could find, boiled into thin but life-saving broth. Against starvation, soup worked. What made peasant soups so enduring wasn't just nutrition, it was sustainability. Every peel, stalk, and stale crust had a second life. Bones weren't garbage, they were broth. Tough roots became soft and mineral-rich with time. A pot on the fire wasn't a single meal, it was a rolling system of preservation and adaptation. Add as you go, cook low and slow, feed many. These soups were built to stretch across days, even weeks. Acidity from sauerkraut or tomatoes helped keep bacteria at bay. Heat acted as natural sanitation. Even without understanding microbiology, cooks had perfected safe storage through flavor. It was also a form of resilience in tough times. Soup pots became communal assets. Families shared ingredients. Communities pooled resources. Nobody had enough, but everyone got something. This wasn't charity, it was infrastructure. And in many ways, it still is. Across the world, variations of peasant soup persist, not because of nostalgia, but because the system works. It made necessity the mother of invention, one pot at a time. These weren't just foods, they were survival systems. From pemmican that endured Arctic expeditions to mushroom ketchup that doubled as medicine. These 10 forgotten foods didn't just feed people, they outsmarted famine, disease, and even time itself. They didn't rely on factories, they relied on patience, biology, and trust in nature's rhythms. And they didn't expire in weeks. Which one surprised you the most? Could you see yourself trying to make any of them? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient food mastery, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who'd appreciate the taste of real resilience. This is Stellar Eureka, signing off.